From rookies in the East Blue who could barely hold a sword, all the way to ancient gods who can erase entire kingdoms from existence. These are the strongest characters in every single arc of One Piece from start to finish. Starting with the very first arc of the series, Romance Dawn. This is where Luffy is just a kid in Fuchsia Village hanging out with the legendary red-haired Shanks. Now you might think the strongest here is Higuma the Bandit, who literally one-shots Luffy when he tries to fight back. But the actual answer is obviously Shanks. When Luffy gets dragged into the ocean by the Lord of the Coast, Shanks loses his arm saving him, and more importantly, he scares an entire Sea King off with a single look. We didn't know it at the time, but that was Conqueror's Haki. Shanks is one of the 4 emperors, easy first pick, and trust me, he's going to come back later in this video in a way you would not expect. After Luffy meets Zoro at Shellstown, we move into the Orange Town arc, where the duo washes up on the island controlled by Buggy the Clown. Buggy ate the Bara Bara no Mi, which makes him basically immune to slashing attacks, which is a horrible matchup for Zoro. But Luffy's a Paramecia user too, and his rubber body lets him casually punch the floating pieces of Buggy clean across the island. The strongest here is Luffy. He's the only one with the toolkit to actually deal with Buggy's gimmick. Next up is the Syrup Village arc, where we meet Usopp. The arc antagonist is Captain Kuro, a former pirate who faked his own death so he could live as a butler and inherit a rich girl's fortune. Kuro's fast, like blink and you'll miss him fast. He uses these wicked claw weapons and pulls off this technique called Stealth Foot that makes him a literal blur. But Luffy still tanks his strongest move and ends the entire scheme with a single Gomu Gomu no Bell. Strongest in Syrup Village is Luffy again. The crew sails into the Baratier arc, where we meet Sanji. The arc antagonist is Don Krieg, who was famously called the strongest man in the East Blue, until he came back covered in his own blood, having just gotten run over by one man. That man? Dracule Mihawk. Mihawk casually slices Krieg's flagship, the Dreadnought Saber, completely in half. Then he dismantles Zoro using a tiny dagger because using his actual sword would have been overkill. Yeah, the world's strongest swordsman casually used a butter knife on the future world's strongest swordsman, and Zoro still couldn't land a clean hit. Mihawk is the easy pick here. Right after Baratier, we get to the Arlong Park arc, the one that finally explains Nami's whole backstory. Arlong is a sawshark fisherman who's been ruling Kokoyasi village for 8 years, using Nami as his slave cartographer. As a fishman, Arlong has 10 times the strength of an average human. His teeth regenerate when broken, and his bite force can crunch through metal. But Luffy still smashes him through his own headquarters. Strongest in Arlong Park is Luffy. Arlong's strong, but Luffy literally bites the entire base apart out of pure rage. Moving on to the Logtown arc, the crew arrives at the town where Roger was born and executed. Luffy gets captured by Buggy on the execution platform, and a literal lightning bolt saves him from the sword. Smoker, the local marine captain, is way stronger than Luffy at this point. Luffy has no answer for a Logia user without Haki, but Smoker isn't even close to the strongest in this arc. That title goes to Monkey D. Dragon, Luffy's father, leader of the Revolutionary Army, the most wanted man in the entire world. Dragon casually appears, blows Smoker away with a gust of wind, and disappears like he was never there. He's terrifying. 6 down, 26 still to go, and the picks only get more crazy from here. Trying to reach the Grand Line, we get to the Reverse Mountain arc, a short one where the crew enters via the famous Reverse Current and meets Laboon, the giant whale, and Crocus, the former doctor of the Roger Pirates. Now this one's actually interesting. Luffy at this point can't really hurt Crocus. And before anyone tells me Crocus is just an old man, bro, he was on Gold D. Roger's ship. He sailed to the end of the Grand Line. Anyone who did that is automatically miles ahead of where Luffy is right now. Strongest in Reverse Mountain is Crocus. When the crew reaches their first proper island on the Grand Line, we enter the Whiskey Peak arc, which turns out to be a Baroque works trap full of bounty hunters dressed as a welcome party. While the rest of the crew gets drunk, Zoro takes on around 100 agents single-handedly. He even fights Mr. 5 and Miss Golden Week without breaking a sweat. The strongest here is Zoro. He's not even at full strength yet, and he's wiping out an entire bounty hunter outfit by himself. Next up is the Little Garden arc, where the crew arrives on a prehistoric island and meets 2 giants, Dory and Broggy, who have been dueling each other for the past 100 years. Mr. 3 from Baroque Works ambushes them, and his wax fruit nearly takes them out, but only because they're already exhausted from fighting each other for a literal century. The strongest in Little Garden are Dory and Broggy. Their Elbaf-style cannon spear attack one-shots a giant sea monster on screen. Pure giant strength is on a different level. And speaking of giants, they're going to come back in a really wild way at the end of this video, so keep that in mind. Anyway, the crew sails through a snowstorm and arrives at the Drum Island arc, where Nami's sick and they meet Chopper, the talking reindeer. They also find out the island's former tyrant, Wapol, has come back to reclaim his throne. Wapol's Munch Munch fruit lets him eat literally anything and incorporate it into himself. He even tanks a cannonball to the face. But Luffy sends him flying with a single attack. Strongest in Drum Island is Luffy. Then we get to the Alabasta arc, where the crew finally arrives at Vivi's home country to stop the warlord Crocodile from triggering a civil war. Crocodile is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, ate the Suna Suna no Mi, and beat Luffy not once but twice before finally getting taken down. So you'd think Crocodile is the answer here, right? Well, not quite, because Porcus D. Ace shows up, Luffy's brother, 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates. He ate the Mera Mera no Mi, which makes him a fire Logia, and he casually wipes out the entire Baroque Works fleet just by walking past. He's leagues above Crocodile. Strongest in Alabasta is Ace. Moving on to the Jaya arc, a short transitional one where the crew is hunting for a way to reach Skypiea. They run into Bellamy and his crew at Mocktown, but Luffy and Zoro just take their punches and walk away without flinching. The real reveal here is Marshall D. Teach, Blackbeard. He's quietly hanging out at Mocktown, eyeballing Luffy, and at this point in the story, he's already strong enough to defeat Ace later in the manga, around chapter 440. Strongest in Jaya is Blackbeard, hands down. Now the crew reaches the legendary Sky Island, the Skypiea arc, where they meet a guy who genuinely believes he's a god. And the scary part? He kind of is. Enel ate the Goro Goro no Mi, a Logia devil fruit that lets him control lightning. We're talking 200 million volts of pure electricity. He's also using Mantra, which we now know is just early observation hockey, before we even knew hockey existed. Luffy beats him only because rubber doesn't conduct electricity. In raw power, Enel is leagues above everyone else here. On to the weird and goofy Long Ring Longland arc, the Davy Back fight one with Foxy and his crew. Luffy beats Foxy in a goofy duel, but right after the crew is celebrating, a tall, sleepy-looking guy on a bicycle rolls up. Aokiji, Marine Admiral, the strongest character we've seen in the entire series up to this point. He casually freezes the entire ocean, freezes Robin solid in seconds, and one-shots Luffy without breaking a sweat. Strongest in Long Ring Longland is Aokiji, no contest. And just so you know, an admiral isn't even close to the scariest pick on this list. On to the Water 7 arc, where the crew arrives at the City of Water and gets caught in a mess involving CP9, the Galley Law Company, and Robin's betrayal. The CP9 agents are ridiculously strong. Lucci, Kaku, and Jabra are all expert assassins with insane Dariki ratings. But the strongest character to actually appear in Water 7 is still Aokiji. He visits the Straw Hats during the arc and warns them straight up, messing with Robin is going to bring the world government down on them. Strongest in Water 7 is Aokiji again. Right after Water 7, we get to the Enies Lobby arc, the actual rescue mission. The crew storms the world government's Judicial Island to save Robin, and Luffy debuts both Gear 2 and Gear 3 in the same arc, fighting Rob Lucci. Lucci's 6 powers and his Cat model Leopard make him an absolute monster. Dariki of 4000, fastest CP9 agent ever recorded. But Luffy beats him in one of the best fights of the series. Strongest in Enies Lobby is Luffy. He's officially reached a new tier here. After saving Robin, the crew heads back to Water 7 in the post-Enies Lobby arc, and we finally meet someone who's been hovering in the background of the entire series. Monkey D. Garp, Luffy's grandfather, the hero of the Marines, the man who fought Roger as an equal. He casually throws cannonballs with his bare hands like he's tossing baseballs. He punches Luffy through several walls just to discipline him. If he was actually trying, the entire crew would be a stain on the floor. Strongest in post-Enies Lobby is easily Garp. Moving on to the Thriller Bark arc, the crew lands on a haunted ghost island controlled by warlord Gecko Moria, who steals shadows. Moria's the antagonist, and Luffy beats him in a brutal citywide brawl. But right after, when the entire crew is barely standing and totally exhausted, Bartholomew Kuma walks in. Another warlord, already a cyborg, ate the pawpaw fruit. He's strong enough that Zoro nearly dies, taking all of Luffy's accumulated pain just to save the crew. Strongest in Thriller Bark is Kuma. 14 arcs left, and the pick coming up at Marineford is going to genuinely melt your brain. Next, the crew heads to the Sabaody Archipelago arc, the gateway to the New World, where they finally encounter the rest of the worst generation, the Celestial Dragons and Marine Admiral Kizaru. Kizaru ate the Pika Pika no Mi, a Logia that lets him move at the speed of light. He casually walks across the archipelago, kicks at light speed, and even Silver's Rayleigh, the literal Pirate King's right-hand man, can only stalemate him. Strongest in Sabaody is Kizaru. This is the moment Oda told the audience, "You think Luffy's strong? Wait until you see who's actually running this world." After Kuma sends Luffy flying, we get to the Amazon Lily arc, the women-only Kuja Island where men aren't allowed. Luffy meets Boa Hancock, Empress of Amazon Lily, master of all 3 forms of haki, and user of the Mero Mero no Mi, which turns enemies to literal stone. The only reason it doesn't work on Luffy is because he's too dense to register attraction, which is a whole bit. She casually petrifies Marines later at Marineford from across the entire battlefield. Strongest in Amazon Lily is Boa Hancock by a landslide. Reaching the Impel Down arc, Luffy infiltrates the world government's underwater prison to rescue Ace before his execution. He runs into the chief warden, Magellan, who ate the Doku Doku no Mi, the poison fruit. Magellan's poison can melt skin off bones, and his giant Hydra technique puts Luffy on a 24-hour death timer just from one hit. Magellan also single-handedly stopped Blackbeard's first incursion into the prison and pushed back the entire prison breakout team. Crocodile, Jinbei, Mr. One, Inazuma, all of them. Honestly, if Magellan was just slightly faster, the entire arc ends with Luffy dying in a cell. Strongest in Impel Down is Magellan, no debate. After escaping Impel Down, we get to the Marineford arc, the biggest event in the first half of One Piece. 3 Marine Admirals, Aokiji, Kizaru, and Akainu, Fleet Admiral Sengoku in his Buddha form, Garp, every single warlord in attendance, the entire Whitebeard pirates, Blackbeard's crew showing up to crash the party, and Shanks himself appearing at the very end to stop the war just by existing. So who's actually the strongest here? It's gotta be Edward Newgate, Whitebeard, the strongest man in the world. He ate the Gura Gura no Mi, the Quake fruit, and he literally tilts the entire battlefield sideways, splits the air, threatens to sink Marineford with a single move. He takes a magma punch through the chest from Akainu and keeps fighting. Records say he was shot 267 times, slashed 152 times, and hit by 46 cannonballs by the end of the war. He died on his feet without a single wound on his back. Now, technically Shanks ends the war. Akainu, the same Akainu who just punched a hole through Whitebeard, backs off the moment Shanks arrives. We'll cover that in another video, but on raw demonstrated power, the strongest in Marineford is Whitebeard. After the war, we get to the post-war arc and the return to Sabaody arc, which I'm covering together since it's basically one continuous stretch. Luffy is in a coma after watching Ace die in his arms. He recovers at Amazon Lily, sends a coded message telling the crew to train for 2 years, and eventually meets back up with everyone at Sabaody Archipelago. Throughout this entire stretch, the recovery, the time skip, and the reunion, the strongest character we see is Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King, right-hand man of the Pirate King. He literally swims through the Calm Belt to reach Amazon Lily, fighting Sea Kings the whole way. He trains Luffy in hockey for 2 years on Rusukaina, and after the time skip, he's still there at Sabaody coding the Sunny for the journey to Fishman Island. Even past his prime, this man is on a different planet. Strongest in this entire stretch is Rayleigh, easily. The Fishman Island arc is the crew's first stop on their journey to the New World. They face Hody Jones and his new Fishman pirates, and Luffy knocks out 50,000 fishmen with a single burst of Conqueror's Haki. That's how strong he is now. But the strongest character connected to Fishman Island is Big Mom. The entire island has been paying her tribute in candy for years just to avoid her wrath. When Luffy declares war on her over a Den Den Mushi, you can feel every single fishman on the island dying inside. Strongest in Fishman Island is Big Mom. And trust me, she's gonna show up again later in this video looking even scarier. Next up is the Punk Hazard arc, the first arc that genuinely pushes the Straw Hats in the New World. They team up with Trafalgar Law to take down Caesar Clown's experiments. They run into Virgo, Smoker, and even encounter a samurai's chopped up body. Doflamingo also appears at the end to come for Caesar. So you might think Doflamingo is the answer here, but the actual strongest is Aokiji, now ex-Marine Admiral, hanging out with the Blackbeard pirates. He casually cools off the burning half of the island and saves Smoker from Doflamingo. Even after leaving the Marines, Aokiji is still that dude. Strongest in Punk Hazard is Aokiji. Then we have the Dressrosa arc, where Luffy and Law team up to take down Doflamingo, the warlord with the awakened Ito Ito no Mi. Doflamingo is genuinely terrifying. Birdcage technique, runs the entire underground market, controls an entire kingdom with strings. Luffy beats him with Gear 4 Boundman in one of the best fights in the series. But the strongest in Dressrosa isn't Doflamingo, it's Marine Admiral Isho, Fujitora, the blind admiral who pulls literal meteors out of the sky. He goes blow for blow with Sabo, second in command of the Revolutionary Army, and walks away fine. He's a different tier of admiral entirely. Strongest in Dressrosa is Fujitora. Now, Luffy and the rest of the crew get to the Zou arc. And yeah, Zou is a literal giant elephant that's been carrying an entire civilization on its back for over 1,000 years. They learn about the road poneglyphs, meet the Mink tribe, and find out Sanji has left the crew to go marry into the Charlotte family. There are strong characters here. Jack of the Drought attacks the island. Inuarashi and Nekomamushi are Duke-level fighters. But the strongest in Zou isn't even a person. It's Zunisha himself. When Momonosuke commands him, Zunisha wipes out Jack's entire fleet with a single trunk swing. Strongest in Zou is Zunisha by a country mile. In the Whole Cake Island arc, Luffy and a small crew sneak into Big Mom's territory to rescue Sanji from a forced political marriage. There are absolute monsters here: Katakuri, Cracker, Jinbei, Smoothie, Oven. Luffy unlocks his Gear 4 Snake Man form and goes toe-to-toe with Katakuri, the sweet commander everyone calls Big Mom's strongest son. But the strongest character in Whole Cake Island is obviously Big Mom herself, in full power in her own kingdom. She has 3 sentient homies, Prometheus, Zeus, and Napoleon, fighting alongside her at all times. She rips souls out of bodies. She tanks attacks that would kill an Emperor crew. The Straw Hats spend most of the arc just trying to escape her. Strongest is Big Mom, no question. Before we get to Wano, we have the Reverie arc, a shorter one where the world's leaders gather at Marijua to make decisions about the future. We finally meet the 5 elders properly, and we get a glimpse of someone sitting on the supposedly empty throne. The 5 elders bow to her, and right after the reverie ends, this same figure casually erases the entire kingdom of Lulusia from existence using an ancient weapon, just for daring to mention Vivi. Strongest in Reverie is Emu. We're going to come back to her in a way that completely breaks the show, so keep her in mind. Now we hit the Wano arc, the longest arc in One Piece. Almost every major character ends up here. Luffy, Law, Kid, Big Mom, the Akazaya 9, Yamato, the Worst Generation, the entire Beast Pirates, even Green Bull at the end. Luffy unlocks Gear 5, achieves Awakening, becomes the personification of cartoon imagination itself, and finally takes down Kaido. But the strongest character in Wano is still Kaido. Known as the strongest creature in the world, Mythical Zone Dragon, he's tried to kill himself 9 separate times, including jumping off the sky island of Onigashima with no parachute, and survived all of them. He survived being boiled alive for an entire hour while holding 9 men above his head. Luffy only beats him after Kaido's been worn down by the Scabbards, Law, Kid, Yamato, and multiple rounds with Luffy himself. The strongest in Wano is Kaido, even with the loss. After Wano, we hit the Egghead arc, where the crew arrives on Vegapunk's futuristic island, and Oda finally throws every single power scaling rule he's ever established directly into the trash. The 5 elders are revealed to all be Mythical Zone users, giant, horrifying creatures pulled straight out of mythology. Saint Saturn alone tanks attacks from a Gear 5 Luffy that flattened Kaido. Sanji kicks him in the face, nothing. Zoro slashes him, nothing. Saturn casually walks across the ocean. None of the elders go down for good. They're all functionally immortal. But the strongest character in Egghead is Emu, because at the end of the arc, after Saturn has shrugged off everything the Straw Hats can throw at him, Emu just shows up and casually strips Saturn of his immortality with a single attack. Saturn, the spider demigod who tanked Gear 5, gets one-shot by Emu's intervention. We're operating at a level above emperors, above admirals, above the strongest creature in the world. Emu doesn't fight. Emu just deletes things. Kingdoms, immortality, history itself. Subscribe real quick. What's coming up is the current chapter we're literally living in, and you don't want to miss this one. In the Elbaf arc, the Straw Hats finally arrive at the legendary giant homeland, where they reunite with Dory and Broggy from Little Garden, get caught up in the political mess surrounding King Harold's family, and meet Loki, the chained giant prince who's been hyped as one of the strongest giants ever born. There's a lot still unfolding here, and Loki absolutely has the potential to take this spot before the arc ends. But the strongest character to actually appear in Elbaf so far is Shanks. The red-haired pirates show up to investigate the situation themselves, and Shanks is the same Shanks you remember from Arc 1, Yonko tier, master of all 3 forms of hockey, including the rarest expression of conquerors, and the same man whose mere presence ended the Marineford War instantly. What makes this so wild is that we started this video with Shanks Shanks scaring a Sea King off Fuchsia Village over 1,000 chapters ago. And now he's still on the top tier of the entire One Piece world. The series has come full circle, and Elbaf might be where Shanks finally goes all out for the first time ever. Strongest in Elbaf right now is Shanks. Now, if you want to see exactly how powerful Luffy would become after being raised and trained by Whitebeard, click on this video next. Go on, click it.